In this lesson, we'll discuss ways that you can customize your fox render to make it unique to you. Let's begin. We've completed the example for this class, but that doesn't mean that we're done learning. I'd like to give you a few tips and tricks for customizing your render, so you can add a bit of your own style to the image and make it your own. It's important to note that this lesson is just to give you ideas for your own project, so feel free to deviate from what I'm showing you here. You don't need to follow along exactly with what I'm doing. I'm just giving you a few more tools to make your render unique. Before we begin, let's save our file as it exists now, so we have a point to come back to if we want later. To do this, just go over here and choose File, and then Save. Now that we've saved the completed class example, we can save a unique class project version of this file so we don't mess up the original. This will give us the freedom to play around without worrying about being able to undo the changes if we don't like them. So to save this new version, we're going to go back to File, and then we'll choose Save As instead. Now down here at the bottom, we can click on this name to change it. I'd recommend that you just add at the beginning of this file name, class project, and then put an underscore to separate it. This will just make it obvious what this file is meant for. Once you've changed the name, go over here and just choose Save As. Now we have a fresh file to continue the lesson with. You don't need to open this new class project version of the file. Blender already did that for us when we used the Save As command. Now let's start with a pretty simple change that has a big impact on the image: color. We'll begin by heading over to the shading workspace found here at the top center. Now in this top viewport, make sure it's set to the rendered mode so we can see all the colors in our image. Alright, now let's start adjusting the color of the fox and their fur. We'll be doing this with one simple node. However, we will need to copy this node to two different locations so everything works properly. We'll start by adjusting the fox's head material first, as that informs the color of the fur, and it's the easiest to see. So to start with, we can go over here to the right side. We can twirl open this just so we have it open for later. And we want to select this, the fox head object. Now down here in this bottom viewport, we're going to zoom out a bit. Then we're going to drag select over these two far right nodes. And we're going to move them even further to the right, as we want to make some room here between them. Now we can hit Shift and A to bring up the add menu, go to search, and then we'll type in hue, H-U-E, and choose hue, saturation, value. We're going to move this node over here and place it directly on top of this top yellow line. So we'll just click to place it, and Blender will automatically connect it for us. Now let's zoom into this node so we can see it a little bit better. This hue, saturation, value node does exactly what it sounds like. It allows you to adjust these parameters with simple sliders. The most useful slider here will be the hue slider, as it's responsible for controlling what you would consider to be the color of the texture. So if we slide this hue slider back and forth, we'll notice that the color of the material changes. If it's moving a little too fast as you move it back and forth, you can also hold Shift while you click and drag on the slider, and it'll move a lot slower so you have more control. One important caveat of this hue slider is it's really only going to change the orange on this texture. It will pretty much leave the white and any of the really dark black areas relatively unchanged. So you'll notice as you slide it back and forth that there's pretty much always a white part on the bottom of the face. There isn't really any hue here to affect, so the slider doesn't have any effect on it. For this example, I'm going to set my hue to 0.1, and that'll make a bluish purple fox. Again, feel free to make your color whatever you'd like. I'm just going to use this color here for the purposes of this example. You also have the ability to adjust how saturated these colors are using this next slider. Higher numbers will make the colors more vibrant, and lower numbers will make the colors less vibrant and closer to gray. If you wanted to make a white fox for your example, you could just set the saturation all the way down to 0, and that will make an almost entirely white fox, except for some of the darker areas where it remains a bit gray. For my example, I'll make the blue a bit more saturated, so I'll set it to 1.25. Lastly, we have the value slider here at the bottom. This slider will control the darkness or the lightness of the color. It's important to note that with this slider, it does actually affect the black and the white areas, as those do have a value to adjust. So if you make it really dark, you'll start getting pretty dark gray here instead of white. Alternatively, you can make it really bright as well to make the white areas even brighter. By default, this slider is going to stop at 2 if you just slide it to the right. However, you are able to type in values higher than 2. So if you type in 5, it'll let you go even brighter. For my example, I'm going to set mine to 1.5, so it's just a little bit brighter than it was before. So now that we understand the basic concepts of how to easily change colors on a material, let's apply the same node to the fur material so that it matches the underlying texture. Please make sure that you're happy with the color of your fox's head first though, as you'll want these nodes to be identical for both the head and the fur. So our first step is to select this hue saturation value node and then hit Ctrl and C to copy it. Now over here in our list, you're going to select either one of these fuzz objects. It doesn't matter as they both have the same material. So I'll just choose the long fuzz for now. Again, you might need to twirl this open in order to see the long fuzz and the short fuzz underneath the head object. So if you don't see them, it's probably because you need to twirl open this arrow. Now that I have one of these fuzz objects selected, I can zoom out here on the bottom. And then again, I'll be drag selecting over these far two right nodes, and then move them over a bit further to the right so I have room for the hue, saturation, and value. Now I can hit Control and V to paste the hue, saturation value that we just adjusted into this material. We can also click and drag this node on top of this yellow line to automatically connect it. And that's it. All the changes that we made to the fox's head have now been applied to the fur attached to it. Due to the fur using the exact same images to color it, the hue, saturation, and value node has the exact same effect on the fur, making it match the head identically. At this point, feel free to head over to the rendering tab and give your image a render. That's where you can really appreciate the new color in all of its fuzzy glory. For now though, we'll keep going with the lesson. Now that you have a new fuzz color, you might also want to change the eyes as well. So let's head over here to the Fox collection, and we're going to select the eyes from the list. Down here in the bottom viewport, make sure you're set to slot 2, which is eye iris. If for some reason you're selected on either of these other materials, make sure you select this material, eye iris, from the list. This is the material that controls the eye color, which is currently set to green. If we zoom into this material, you notice that we already have a hue, saturation, value node set here to the left of this green node. So we won't need to add a new one, we can just adjust this one. Simply adjust these three sliders to find a color that you like. For my example, I'll set my values to create a bright pink color. So I'll set my hue all the way up to 1, lower my saturation down to 0.8, and then set my value to 1.5. The background color can also be easily changed to a better matching color. Over here in the outliner list, scroll to the very bottom, and then we're looking for background plane inside the background elements collection. Now we can select it here from the list. For this particular object, the background plane, you will have to select it from the list rather than the viewport, as I currently have the selection locked to prevent accidental selection during the lesson. So the only way to select this right now is to select it here from the list. Now if we go down to the material, we can see that this material is much more simple than the previous ones. It simply uses this base color here to change the color of the background. So to change this background color, all you need to do is click on this green box and then use this color picker to choose a new color. You can easily adjust these colors by clicking anywhere on this circle here to move the dot around to the color you like, and then you can also adjust the brightness using this slider here on the right to adjust how bright or dark it is. For my render, I'll make mine kind of a dark purple. Alright, let's do one last color change before we move on to a new tip. For this change, we can zoom out a little bit so we can see more of the fox, and then we're going to select either the vest or the bow tie. It doesn't matter, they both use the same material right now. So I'll just select the bow tie for now. Now let's zoom out down here on the bottom, and again, we'll drag select over these two far right nodes, drag them to the right to make some more room, and now we're going to hit Shift and A to bring up the add menu, go to search, and then you can either choose it right from this list, or if you need to, you can type it in again, HUE, and choose hue, saturation, value. And then again, we'll place it here at the very top on top of this yellow line. Now let's zoom in so we can see the node better. And then just like for the other materials, go ahead and adjust these values to find a color that you like for this bow tie. I'll make mine a light pink to match the eyes. So I'll set my hue to 0.85, my saturation to 0.9, and then my value to 1.9 to make it a good bit brighter. Once you've found a color that you like, we do actually have one more change to make. So we're going to zoom out and then go down here to where it says sheen at the bottom of this large green node. So you'll find it at the very bottom down here, and you should see a blue box. The sheen setting here is used to make the fabric look a bit more like fabric. The setting will also appear on the coat and the shirt fabric, so if you decide to change them too, be on the lookout there as well. So as a quick explainer of what this sheen does, if we zoom in now to the bow tie, we can see at these extreme angles here where the fabric moves backwards in space, we have kind of a whitish blue color. We can see it around the edges here. That's controlled by the sheen. The color that you place down here in this tint box will have a subtle effect on the material when viewed at these extreme angles. This is an important facet of what makes fabric look like fabric. It's helping to mimic microfibers that catch the light. We want this color to be similar to the overall color of the fabric. However, it's typically a bit brighter than the base fabric. So for this pink bow tie that I made, I would want to change mine to kind of a bright pink. So maybe I'll find a pink color down here and then also brighten it up and maybe make it a little less saturated. by moving it towards the center. So for example, if you used green, you might want to make it more of this color instead. However, for mine, I'll set it back to this light pink. Okay, so now we've changed both the bow tie as well as the vest. But what if you wanted them to be different colors from each other? In that case, we would need to separate the material and make a duplicate of it so that we can adjust them independent of each other. So first I'm going to select the bow tie again, and it doesn't matter which part of the bow tie I select. There's the knot in the middle, and then there's the bow on the outside. They're technically two different objects, so select either one. Now down here, you'll see next to the word vest, there's a little number 4, showing you that this material is currently applied identically to 4 different objects. The bow on the outside, the knot in the middle, and then both sides of the vest. To make a new duplicate of this material, all we need to do is click on this number 4 to tell Blender to make this version of the selected object have a unique version of this texture. So we can see now that it's changed it from vest to vest.001, meaning it's a new material. Now let's rename this new material to bow tie instead. That way we know what this is actually applied to. Now we can zoom out on the material, go back up to this hue slider, and then adjust this to make it a new color. I'm going to make mine more of a yellow color. So I'll set it to 0.95, 1.5, and then 2 for the value. After you change the color, don't forget to go back down to the sheen and change this tint color to match as well. So I'll need to make mine more of a warm yellow color. Whichever part of the bow tie that you didn't select still has the old vest material applied to it. So all you'll need to do is select this part in the middle if that's the part that you didn't select, and then go down here to this drop down and then choose the new bow tie material. If you want, you can just type in BOW to filter the list and choose bow tie. And now these both have the same material applied. The two methods that I just showed you for changing the color of the materials can be applied to nearly every object in this scene. So feel free to explore these objects on your own and see what you can customize to your liking. That includes everything from the color of the jacket to the color of the plants or even the stump. For now, let's move on to the last tip that I have for you. Another major aspect of this render is the bright and cheerful lighting. The lighting of a render plays a large role in the way that you perceive it and the mood that it conveys. Changing the lighting can have a subtle effect on the render, like just highlighting a different part of the model, or it can completely transform the mood of the render if you go more drastic. Let's cover both of these changes quickly so you know how you can implement them in your own image. We'll start with the simpler option, just changing the focus of the render to a new part. This can be achieved by changing the position of the lights that are already there, or by eliminating some of the light sources so that the light is more directional. Let's head back to the layout workspace for these changes, found up here at the top left. Next, make sure you have the left viewport set to the rendered mode using this far right button. Now in the outliner list on the far right, we're going to scroll all the way up to the very top, and then make sure you have this camera and lights collection twirled open. This is where you'll find obviously the camera, as well as all of the lights that are currently in the scene. Before we make any changes, we do need to re-enable a few things that I had turned off for us while we worked on the class example. First, let's unlock the selection of all of these lights so that we can actually move them around in the viewport. To do this, we'll go over here and just click on these small arrow icons until they turn white. We'll do that for each of these lights to allow us to actually select them within the viewport. If for some reason you can't see these arrows that I just clicked, go over here to the top right and click on this filter icon, and then make sure that this button here is highlighted in blue. Okay, we have one last change now. So over here in the right viewport, if we zoom out and rotate around, you'll notice that you don't really see any lights within this scene. It seems like it's empty. This is because I had them hidden from view so that they didn't clutter our view as we worked. We'll need to re-enable them now so that we can see them. To do this, we're going to go up here to this top option bar, click in our middle mouse button, and move it all the way over here to the left so that we can see this button here, the Viewport Overlays button. Now we're going to click on this drop down, go down this list, and we're going to turn on Extras. Once you turn this on, you should now see all the lights show up in your scene. If for some reason you don't see these lights, it's probably because this button here is not turned on. So if it looks like this still, you'll need to click this button and highlight it in blue so that you see all these lights. Alright, so with all of our setup done, let's actually change some lighting. The most simple change that we can make is just to turn off a few of these lights and make the scene a little bit less bright. So as an example, we could go over here to this list and we could hide this light fill by clicking both of these buttons here, so the eyeball as well as the camera, and then we could also hide this light rim left by clicking the eyeball and the camera. Turning these lights off has had the effect of showing off more of the face's curvature and volume without really changing much at all. This left side now is receiving a lot more shadows from the protrusions on the face. So this nose here appears to stick out further than it used to, as well as the ears looking a lot more deep than they were before. And that's simply just because this area isn't receiving as much light. We also have the option to move around lights in the scene as well. So for this example, I'm going to select this light underscore main from the list on the right side. And then over here in the viewport, we can just move this light around using the move tool. You can see as you move this around, the shadows on this image here are changing pretty drastically. So for my example, I'll move it a bit higher, and then I can also change the rotation of this light relatively easily by hovering my mouse over this small yellow dot here at the very end of the light. So you'll see any light that you select here will have this small dot. If you grab that yellow dot and you position it on something, so just dragging it onto something, it will angle the light towards that object. So if I drag it down here to the head, we'll notice that it now angles directly towards the head instead. We can now see how eliminating a couple lights and moving some others around can change the look of the image. But what if we wanted something a bit more drastic? These changes will help us reshape the mood of the image and give it a completely new feeling. Let's start by hiding all of the lights in the scene by going over here and clicking the eyeball and the camera next to each object here listed with the word light. So we're just going to make the scene entirely dark. Next, we're going to click on this small white folder icon next to camera and lights to make this the default collection. This will ensure that any new light that we add pops into this collection automatically, so we don't have to find it and move it here. Now over here in the right viewport, we can hit Shift and A to bring up our add menu, go down to light, and then choose point. Now let's use the move tool to move this light up, and then just position it off to the side of the face. Somewhere around here is fine. We can see a little bit of the fox illuminated at this point, but it's pretty dim, so let's change that. So over here on the right side, we're going to click on this little green light bulb icon to change the object data properties. This is where we'll change the brightness and the color of the light. Let's start by making the light significantly brighter than it is now. To do this, we're going to change the power value found here. So I'm going to change the power from 10 all the way up to 500, so significantly brighter. Now we can also adjust the color using this color bar found here at the top. In the interest of making my render feel pretty different from the original, I'm going to choose a pretty vibrant color. But as always, feel free to pick whatever color you think looks best for the image that you want to create. In my case, I'll make this kind of a neon blue color. But if you wanted something a bit more natural, sort of like the original, you could pick something down here maybe, closer to the orange or the red side. This blue light is certainly different from what we had before, so it works perfectly for changing the mood of the image. Now let's add a second light of a different color somewhere else in the scene. So with my light still selected over here in the right viewport, we can hit Shift and D to duplicate this light, and then just move it over here to the left side. I'm going to make this light a bit lower, and then also move it behind the fox. Somewhere around here is fine. If I wanted more of this left side of the face illuminated still, I could move it further away from the fox so that it catches more lighting there. So maybe somewhere around here would work fine as well. Now that I have a new light over here, I can change the color and the brightness of this one as well. So let's lower the brightness of this one down to half of the other, so 250. And then I'll make this color maybe a bright pink, just to offset it. After you have the basic scheme for your lighting setup, feel free to select some of these lights and move them around to better fit the image that you want to create. Maybe I'll move this a bit to the front so I can see more of the face illuminated. I can also move it to the left a bit more. And then don't be afraid to turn on some of these other lights that I had before. Right now my background is pretty dark, so maybe I'll turn on this light background. So I'll turn on both the eyeball as well as the render icon. And I think that's done a pretty good job of completing the lighting for this image. With just these three lights, I've completely transformed the mood and the look of the fox render into something brand new. Obviously, this might not be the vibe that you're going for with your image, but hopefully it gives you some ideas of how you can change your lighting to meet the look that you're after. And now finally, I'll leave you with the most fulfilling, but also the least guided tip that I have. Create your own character and add some woolly fuzz to them. It's really fun seeing your own creations come to life with this fuzzy, woolly look that we just explored. This class should have given you enough tools to practice these techniques on your own creations. Even if you're not confident with every aspect of this process, there are a few things more valuable and fulfilling as an artist than to see your skills improve with practice and to see your creations come to life. I can't wait to see what you all create. Congratulations on reaching the end of our class. I wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for taking my class. Your participation and excitement for learning is incredibly rewarding for me as a teacher, and I can't thank you enough. Now that you've got all these new skills under your belt, I can't wait to see where your creativity takes you. I wish you the best of luck in creating your own fuzzy creations in Blender. Please feel free to tag me on Instagram with your creations. I'd love to see them. You can find me at HarryHelps_ on Instagram. As I mentioned at the beginning of this class, this entire class is on Skillshare where I'm recognized as a top teacher. You'll find this class alongside over 20 other premium classes of mine, the vast majority of which are Blender classes. Each of these classes follow an identical beginner-friendly approach, and a lot of them also include starter files to make the class even more guided. I've included a link to a free month of premium Skillshare membership in the description and comments below. During that free month, you can watch as many classes as you'd like across the entire platform, featuring thousands of interesting topics. I've even received 4 different staff picks and over a dozen browse features for my classes like Complete Beginner's Guide to Blender 3D, Learn the Basics of Character and Object Animation, Create a Retro Anime Illustration in Blender 3D, and Create a 3D Vaporwave Animation. If you're not interested in joining Skillshare at this time, no problem. I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe, like, and share this class though. It really helps my channel out and allows me to bring more free classes to you. Don't forget to leave a comment if you have any questions during the class. If you want to try out another completely free YouTube Blender class of mine, check out my recent Blame Manga Style Animation class, my Animate a Magic Portal class, or my Animate a Ferrofluid Material class. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in another class soon.